Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We'll give it a few seconds to let people join. Thank you for joining us this evening. I see some familiar names have joined us. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Ask Us Anything webinar. My name is Glenn Guyton, Executive Director for Mennonite Church USA. Tonight, I am joined by Marty Lehman, moderator for Mennonite Church USA, John Carlson, past moderator and current executive board member for Mennonite Church USA, and Michael Danner, associate executive director for Church Vitality. Tonight's gathering is in the webinar format, so all attendees are muted and the chat is disabled. We will, however, be posting some links in the chat. Thank you for being a part of this webinar, and we appreciate your participation. We have received numerous emails and calls from across Mennonite Church USA related to the upcoming membership vote of the Mosaic Conference. So we decided that this format would reach the most people and provide the answers people were requesting. Now, our first question does come from Ohio Conference. And that question is, will Mosaic folks be present to share? No. This time is dedicated to questions for the executive board leadership and staff. It is our understanding that Mosaic Conference will be having information sessions for its members related to their process. We are answering more broad-based questions that we hope will help all of our members moving forward. Due to the high volume, we have pre-selected a number of questions that we hope we can answer in the 90 minutes allotted for this webinar. We have selected questions that we believe will benefit the most participants, prioritizing questions from our Mosaic members. So thank you for your understanding. If time permits, we will answer additional questions or clarifying questions. Feel free to use the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. Only the panelists will be able to see your questions, and we will be able to answer as many questions as time allows. Please note that this webinar is being interpreted in Spanish and Indonesian. To access the interpretation, please click on the globe icon and select your language. If you would just join me in a word of prayer as we start, I'm going to actually read a prayer from Voices Together, number 959. The church is the body of Christ, created by God and sustained by the Spirit. The church embodies Jesus' way of life in the world, revealing God's reign through words and actions. When we choose to become members of the church, we commit ourselves to Christ, to one another, and to God's mission of healing and hope. When we fall short of this vision, we commit to turning toward one another with compassion and turning toward Christ, our strength and our guide. Amen. Again, thank you for joining us. We will try to take our time answering the questions because of the interpretation. But our first question will be directed to Marty Lehman. This question comes from Mosaic Conference. And the question is, Who is holding up the idea of mediation with the two executive teams?
So I'm going to read the minutes from the executive board meeting in May. And at that meeting, we had said that the executive board values relationships with Mosaic as an area conference of Mennonite Church USA. Mosaic's proposal to become a program entity is not viable within our structure, but we desire reconciliation for broken relationships. To that end, we propose a mediated conversation between the full executive board and Mosaic board. So that was the action from the board meeting. And at this point, that has not happened. I am an advocate for mediation, and I think mediation could be very helpful in this situation. But I also don't see it solving all the problems and all the issues that are involved. We very much want Mosaic to stay within Mennonite Church USA and to be a part of our family, our church family. But we also respect Mosaic's process, and we want to bless them in whatever direction they feel is their calling.
And so, Marty, as a follow-up, we've talked about partnership, or partnership has been tossed around that word. The follow-up question is it even possible per MCUSA bylaws for Mosaic to have partnership like they're asking us to vote on?
It is, yes, it is possible for us to share ministries. And I'm using the term ministries because partnership has a lot of different meanings. It's my understanding that Steve Chris from Mosaic and Michael Danner from Mennonite Church USA are in conversation about the Hispanic Ministries program, as we have a shared Hispanic ministry staff with Mosaic.
Okay, and so just to clarify, we're saying that there is some opportunities for sharing of maybe specific ministries, but as we think about the Mennonite Church USA bylaws, this would not involve the transfer of ministry credentials or congregational affiliation, that it would
Right.
only be at the ministry
Ministry.
or executive level.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Marty. Our next question from Mosaic will go to John Carlson. That question says, is there any possible way to have an outside mediator work with Mosaic and Mennonite Church USA? Why does Mosaic really want to leave Mennonite Church USA? John.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn, and thanks for that question. As Marty noted, the MCUSA Executive Board did propose a mediated conversation as a next step. We extended that invitation in May. That proposal was not received or not accepted by the Mosaic Board. They issued a press release. You can read some more of their rationale around that specific decision in their press release. I think the concern was that it might focus too much on interpersonal relationships rather than structural challenges. I don't think that's necessarily the case with mediation. I think mediation can be a way to name structural challenges and work at them. So I believe it is possible. I think that invitation that the executive board extended in May remains open. And I would sort of renew that appeal and invitation for Mosaic to join the executive board in a mediated conversation to see what other possible futures might open up to us. The question as to why Mosaic really wants to leave MCUSA, I don't think I'm in a position to answer that. I've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years trying to listen, trying to understand. I feel like I've been able to identify certain threads, certain recurring issues, certain friction and pain points. But ultimately, if you're a delegate in Mosaic Conference, I would encourage you to pose that question to Mosaic leaders.
Okay, thank you, John. Well, part of the follow-up for that question is, what structures are in place to get mediation to take place? The lack of dialogue has been frustrating. So I guess that's a question and a statement.
A question and a statement, sure. And I would say there has been a lot of dialogue that has taken place. Marty and I have joined many conversations between the two of us and Mosaic's moderator and current assistant moderator. There has been dialogue happening. Perhaps that dialogue hasn't been as public or as open as some people would wish that it were. I can certainly understand that. What structures are in place to get mediation to take place? There really aren't. A lot of certainly there are no coercive structures to force that sort of outcome. As Anabaptists, we place a very high value on voluntary association. So people are free to choose to be part of a church, and it's implied that then people are also free to choose not to be part of a church. When MCUSA was formed 25 plus years ago, the folks doing that work recognized the potential that area conferences may have disagreements with one another. So the MCUSA bylaws say that if there's an unresolved conflict between area conferences, the area conferences involved may work with the MCUSA Executive Board to determine procedures to be followed in resolving such dispute. That's not quite the current situation that we're in. The bylaws also say that area conferences should strive to work in harmony and cooperation with the total denomination, as well as with their member congregations. If there is serious disagreement, either party may initiate discussion to seek resolution through the denominational office, so that would be national staff, executive board staff, or the Constituency Leaders Council. So there are parts in our system that seem to be called upon to work for peace, to make every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. But the structural challenges that we've been navigating have made it difficult for us to lean into those. But again, the invitation to Mosaic's leaders remains open, that we would love to have further conversation.
And I think some clarification may be necessary for people outside of the structures. I think this has been framed as Mosaic versus Mennonite Church USA, which really isn't the case. A CLC is a vital part of the resolution process for Mennonite Church USA, right? We are a denomination of conferences, and then, of course, congregations derive their membership through the area conference. So the bylaws does give a couple of forums. One of those is the Constituency Leadership Council, or CLC. We'll go to the next question. This will be to Michael Danner. What, if anything, can be done within Mennonite Church USA to keep us, and this is from Mosaic, to keep us connected and to keep the individual congregations in Mosaic connected?
Yeah, thank you. That is a great question. I want to just begin by reiterating what John just said as well, and that is that within MCUSA, really rooted in our Anabaptist understanding of church, faith, community, ecclesiology, we believe in voluntary association, right? And so each congregation gets to discern for itself what affiliations they have. Each conference gets to discern membership within their area conference. And then MCUSA collectively is simply the gathering of those area conferences. And so the whole structure is set up for each congregation and each conference actually to discern for themselves the level of connection that they have to the wider church. And so, yeah, I think that's already kind of built in to some degree to the way MCUSA is structured. And so congregations have freedom to manage their own affairs and also to engage in the conference, to engage in the national level, to engage resources as they see fit. And each conference then is also, as they're connected, they provide membership for their congregations into MCUSA. And so it's important to say that every time there's a separation, either a congregation from a conference or even a conference from the wider body, that is a grief for everyone involved in the church, the whole church, not just staff, not just board members, but we all grieve the loss of membership in that way, or that loss of relationship with this connection. So we are always open and willing, as we always have been, to work with congregations and conferences around substantive issues.
And Michael, I'll just ask you, just for the sake of the
Brevity.
interpreters, slow down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That Mountain Dew has you hyped up.
I always talk fast. I'm sorry. Yeah. What's the next part of your question, Glenn?
Yeah. Well, are there any projected plans or visions to hold us all together?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. As I've thought about that, the first thing that came to my mind is, one, slow down, sorry, is that actually holding us all together is actually a responsibility of all of us. And whenever you put that responsibility on one party over another, and it becomes, yeah, like, well, why aren't you doing something to keep us together, or why aren't you? It just becomes really unhelpful and unhealthy. And so the question is, yeah, are we open and willing to be with one another, to continue to engage one another without moving away from one another? So I think we have the capacity to do it, but it's again the result of a bunch of choices that lots of folks make in order to make that happen. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think a part of that too that I know I've expressed to people from Mosaic is that, you know, we have a number of area conferences, and so the executive board really tries not to make decisions based on just one part of the church, right? We have to consider the impact of all of the decisions on the totality of the church, right? We have to hold the entire denomination together, whether that's, you know, conferences, racial ethnic groups, other affinity groups. You know, we have a number of people with very specific concerns. And part of the challenge of leadership is balancing those things so that we can live in that harmony. Oh, an additional question, Michael, will it be possible for Mosaic congregations to dual affiliate with MCUSA conferences if Mosaic votes to leave?
Yeah, yes. So I mean, the short answer is yes, and it's up to the particular area conferences they might want to join. So area conferences actually discern who can be in, who are and who are not members of their area conference. So that's not an MCUSA decision that the national body makes, but each conference makes that. And in my engagement with conferences, I am not aware of any conference that actually does not allow dual affiliation of their congregations with outside entities. So in this case, if Mosaic leaves MCUSA, they would simply be like other LMC or some other outside agencies. And I'm not aware of any conference that would not allow someone to be dual status, to be a part of Mosaic and a part of their conference. Again, the only caveat is that they would have to follow the process of that conference, and then that conference would discern membership through that process. So, but yes, it absolutely is possible, and we have congregations that are a member of MCUSA conferences and outside networks and entities like that. So,
yeah. I'm going to take a little break just to answer a couple of questions that are coming through the chat that I think are very interesting. A lot of things go on in Mennonite Church USA that people aren't always aware of. We have a question about why aren't there no Mosaic representation on the board? Well, I think it's twofold. And the person says there hasn't been one for many years. First of all, I'll say shout out to Joy Suter, who's on this webinar now. She was the moderator of the denomination. I worked with her closely for many years, and she made sure that we appointed a number of people from Mosaic in various positions and committees during her tenure. Also, the board is designed to represent the entire church, and so there are only a limited number of spots on the board. And we do try to rotate those through the Leadership Discernment Committee. If you have interest in serving or nominating someone, we do have a process for that. Please submit that name. Another question was, how do we summarize the concerns of Mosaic? Are they similar to the ones other conferences have brought? Those that have left Mennonite Church USA. Michael, you might want to touch on that. I think that
I've been in a lot of those conversations.
Okay,
Glenn,
all right.
so I'd be happy to. And I do apologize if I am mischaracterizing, misunderstanding. I would again invite this question to be posed more clearly and forthrightly to Mosaic leaders. But as I would characterize it, I'm trying to speak slowly like Michael. I'm not a Mountain Dew guy, but I do over-caffeinate in my own ways. So I am trying to speak slowly. I apologize. The way I would characterize it, the first kind of ways that this surfaced would have been, I would say, in the fall of 2022. The executive board received an open letter from Mosaic's leadership that talked about the difficulty some Mosaic delegates experienced during the special delegate assembly in May of 2022. Some of those centered on the particular concerns coming from BIPOC communities. And the way that they were described were concerns that the delegate assembly was too focused on time and task orientation rather than relational orientation, and also challenges of language. Since then, we've heard additional concern about the process and the outcome of MCUSA's delegates adopting the resolution for repentance and transformation that opened the door to greater LGBTQ inclusion in the denomination. We've also heard some concerns around international credentialing and international partnerships. Those are the main things that I've heard. And my view is that MCUSA leadership has made good faith efforts to try to respond to those concerns as they have been named. We cannot change the past, but I believe there have been efforts made to work at some of those things.
All right, thank you. So let's go back to another structured question from Mosaic, and this goes to Michael. Why can't there be flexibility to allow partnership, more freedom for conferences to join other networks? And can you make it possible for individual churches to join the denomination? Michael, I'll let you tackle both of those.
Okay, yeah, two different questions. On the second part of that first question about freedom for conferences to join other networks, actually there are no prohibitions in MCUSA bylaws or in praxis that would disallow an area conference from joining other networks. So if they would want to relate, for instance, to Jesus Collective or some other place like that, they could certainly do that without that impacting their relationship with Mennonite Church USA. So I'm not sure what more flexibility is needed. Really, the freedoms that conferences have in the bylaws are stated as this: each area conference retains the right to final decision to manage its own affairs of its organization's personnel, program, and management of property. And so in terms of the personnel and program aspects, they can actually do that, and they have freedom to do that, right? So yeah, I don't know what more to say about that. When it comes to this question of making it possible for individual members to join MCUSA, what we're talking about is the difference between direct membership in MCUSA versus what we currently have, which is derived membership. And so currently a congregation is a part of MCUSA through the area conference. And the question is, can the church just do an end around the conference and just be a direct member of MCUSA? That is not a new question or a new request that was actually present from the formation of MCUSA and integration way back in the beginning. And the thinking around not allowing direct membership is that it could lead to more fracturing even in the area conferences. And so if you imagine at an area conference level, if a congregation had a particular issue with area conference leadership, direct membership would allow them simply to short circuit working out those kind of issues or concerns within the area conference and just become a direct member of Mennonite Church USA. So the thinking has always been that it actually undermines conference authority and the regional kind of gathering of congregations within community. That said, MCUSA has a direct resolution process where anybody can bring a resolution to change any aspect of the bylaws at any time during the biennium. And so if somebody wants to present a full resolution that opens up direct membership, I think that would be considered by the delegates, and that change could be made by the delegate body. That would be their purview, right? Or within their purview.
And I think over the years, we've encouraged different conferences, different iterations of conferences to submit well-written resolutions to change the process. We've sought legal counsel over the years of what the impact of this would be, and it would change some legal agreements that we have. It would change the 501c3 status of a number of individual congregations. So these decisions have repercussions for the area conference, for congregations, for our ability to navigate globally. We've talked with our partners in Canada about structural changes and the impact that their structural changes had when they reorganized their denomination. So we have actually looked at these things, but we've also encouraged, or I've encouraged different conference leaders to get together with other conferences who make up Mennonite Church USA to give us a proposal, give us a well thought out proposal to help us think through these things. And we have not received that as of my tenure or before. I've been around for 16 years in the denomination. I haven't gotten that yet.
Yeah, I would add too that of the 15 conferences within MCUSA, this idea or the request to actually even consider direct membership has only been expressed by 3 of the current conferences. So that's another consideration out of 15 conferences. If the current membership structure is working, like how do you balance that? So.
All right. Now it's time for me to ask myself a question. And this is from Mosaic. How will executive board and executive board staff relate to Mosaic Conference if Mosaic votes to discontinue their relationship uh, with Mennonite Church USA? I will say, and there are a couple of questions in the chat asking if we're taking Mosaic's concerns seriously. And I'll start off by saying that I've visited Mosaic Conference during my time more than any other conference in Mennonite Church USA. I've had what I thought were really good relationships with different leaders in Mosaic. A number of our staff people have gone to Mosaic. I've visited with the racial ethnic groups in Mosaic at different times. I've spoken at uh, schools in Mosaic. I've been to all of the well, a lot of the partnering ministries. Worked with the city schools. So Mosaic has really been a conference that I've really tried to work with deeply over my time as executive director. Um, and so I think we're always open to conversations. But the question gets a little fuzzy if you're asking about individual congregations, or are we talking about the leaders of the conference? We have a shared staff person um, that we work with. Marco Guete is a shared staff person. Uh, we have many intentional relationships with other conferences that have left. We had intentional meetings with LMC, Lancaster Mennonite Conference, when Keith Weaver was still their executive director. Um, we have individual relationships with people from Lancaster and from Ivana who may come and participate in different programs that we've had. Um, but based on my experience in the church, it's been difficult to maintain relationships when you have a congregational or denominational split. I have not seen it lead to stronger or more robust relationships. I think these are just normal organizational dynamics. Some people have talked about Paul and Barnabas in their split, but I don't know of any scriptural reference where it says that they reconciled or that they strengthened their relationship by separating. So we're not opposed to continue to relate or to have joint programs. I believe that Michael Danner has talked to Steve about, again, Marty mentioned Hispanic ministries. Are there opportunities for partnership? We're open to those things. And there is no animosity from the executive board staff or the executive board toward Mosaic that would prevent us from working together. You know, Mosaic has a mission, a call that it feels is important, and we're here to support the members of Mennonite Church USA. Um, if you think about a denominational split, it isn't just about governance. It's, part of our identity. People join the conference and the denomination for values and belonging, and splits shake that foundation. The other question was, what would it take for Mosaic Conference to rejoin Mennonite Church USA in the future if MCUSA develops a new structure? Well, first, I would hope that the people of Mosaic, the members of Mosaic, would be part of our restructuring process. Uh, we would hope to to glean from their wisdom, to hear their concerns, to have them part of making the denomination better. But we do have a process for admitting new congregations, new conferences. New area conferences may be admitted, or existing area conferences may be terminated through action of the delegate assembly. Again, the delegate assembly is where these decisions are made. A recommendation would come through the constituency leadership council, which we mentioned before, an essential part of our structure that would go to the executive board and then ultimately to the delegate assembly. So there is a process if a conference decides to leave and wants to come back, but I hope that's not what we are designing our process towards. We think Mosaic is a vital part of Mennonite Church USA, and we would like them to work with us as we launch our restructuring process. All right, John, I have a question for you from Western District Conference. All right. How do you understand the differences between Mosaic conferences and MCUSA's definitions of partnership? I think we've touched on this, but maybe you can go a little bit deeper.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn, and thanks to whoever in Western District raised this question. The word partnership has become pretty central to this ongoing conversation. And I would say that from an MCUSA leadership perspective, MCUSA is a relational network. MCUSA only exists as the relationships that exist between congregations and area conferences, and then the things that are birthed out of those relationships, like all of our structures, our bylaws, our agencies. So at our best, every part of MCUSA is presently in partnership with every other part of MCUSA. That is what we are. And so I think at times I have struggled personally to understand what Mosaic is seeking to change through using this language. I believe that Mosaic already is a partner with MCUSA and every part of MCUSA. That's the status quo. That's the present. My understanding also is that Mosaic has something within their structure called Partners in Ministry, which is congregations or organizations who are not members of Mosaic, but who share Mosaic's values and a vision for Anabaptist witness in their communities. So Mosaic already had this structure existing. There's nothing quite parallel to that in MCUSA's current structure. As others have noted, there is a process for anyone to bring proposed changes to MCUSA's structure. We have invited we've invited Mosaic to engage in that process if they want to propose these changes for the rest of the denomination to discern together. We haven't seen those proposals, but I think that's part of the difference is that MCUSA believes that membership and partnership are part of the same thing, ways that we relate together, whereas it seems like Mosaic uses partnership in a slightly different way.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go to our follow-up question. I think we kind of answered this one. So Marty, let's go to your question. Describe, and this is from Mosaic, describe the discernment process and mission focus of Mennonite Church USA.
Certainly. So let me just read from the bylaws if we're not sick of hearing about the bylaws by now. The bylaws say that our purpose is to participate fully in God's work of setting things right in a broken world, redeeming and restoring all things in Christ to God's intended design as we live into God's new future that has already begun. Joining in God's activity in the world, we develop and nurture missional Mennonite congregations of many cultures. The mission of Mennonite Church USA is to share with others the gift of God's love through our worship, witness, and life together. To this end, we claim Jesus as the center of our faith, community as the center of our lives, and reconciliation as the center of our work. I think that's a good description of what we are all about. And I think the statement about joining God's activity in the world as we develop and nurture missional Mennonite congregations of many cultures is really central to what Mennonite Church USA is all about. On the very practical level, executive board resources area conferences, and they in turn resource their congregations. Some of the things that we work on with conferences and often with Mennonite Church Canada too, not always, depending on some legal things, but there's polity work, credentialing, recently the Safe Church practices, pastor salary guidelines, the Corinthian plan. Those are all some examples of some of the things that we do. They're not real flashy kinds of things, but they're the administrative things that denominations do. We also represent Mennonite Church USA and with other bodies. Mennonite World Conference would be a good example. We appoint someone to the MCC board. I think we still appoint someone to the MDS board. We used to. I don't know if we still do. I think the Sanctuary Church lawsuit that is currently in process is another example of how we represent Mennonite Church USA and kind of speak more broadly to the world. So a lot of what Mennonite Church USA does is administrative. I didn't mention, things like appointing board members, and then of course there's planning the convention. There's just a lot of things that happen in the background that often people don't notice them when they're done. People notice them if they're not done. And if those things would go away, people would notice.
All right. Marty, just a follow-up question, like what changes are being considered to MCUSA structures and policies in response to Mosaic concerns?
Yeah, we have been talking about working on some new structures. If you think about Mennonite Church USA was formed I think we were officially formed in 2001. We are now in 2025. We're in a very different world. And we also have fewer congregations. And so we really need to look at our structures and what we're doing. And so at our executive board meeting here a week or two ago, we talked about the work that is in process. We're working on a committee, and we have hired a consultant. And there's a timeline for this group with the goal of having recommendations from that committee by the next convention in 2027 in Cincinnati. So that is in process. And if you have real interest in being on a committee like that, let Glenn know. I know he's still working on trying to find people. So.
All right, thank you. And we'll have a website up soon that will keep everyone informed about that process. We'll have some recommendations for the delegate, hopefully, at the end of that process, and the delegates will be able to help shape the future of the denomination. Michael Danner, question for you. How central is Mosaic's unhappiness in the question of credentialing leaders from other countries? And I think we have another question about immigrant churches and and church plants in Mosaic.
Okay, let's start with the first one. So one, I don't really know how central this is to Mosaic's unhappiness. So you would, again, I think I would encourage you to ask them in terms of how that weights relative to their overall dissatisfaction. What I can say, just for purposes of clarity, is that credentialing is an area conference responsibility. Credentialing is something that the area conference does on behalf of MCUSA, but area conferences, the national body, our office does not control credentialing decisions made by area conferences. So outside the area of like misconduct or those kinds of things, which does get into kind of national level stuff, credentialing decisions are made by the conference. So we have raised questions, MCUSA, with both Mosaic and Western District, relative to how you would supervise. How do you supervise? How do you vet? How do you do background checks? How do you do misconduct cases with persons that are nationals of other countries? That is a complicating factor. I think it's probably fair to say our response has been, as a national body, we prefer you not, because it's kind of complicated, but at the end of the day, it is the decision of the area conference. And frankly, at this time, Mosaic has done so, and they do credential people in other countries, as does Western District. We do not stop that. We actually consider anybody credentialed by an area conference as credentialed in MCUSA. The only limit that those folks might have in relating to MCUSA is because they're nationals in other countries, they cannot participate on MCUSA boards or on MCUSA board appointments in the United States. Other than that, they are considered credentialed leaders. And there's a long history. I was a conference minister in Illinois Mennonite Conference back in 2015. Our conference actually also credentialed folks that served in other places, also had networks of credentialed leaders that were nationals in other places in South and Central America. So this is not new. And so it's a little, yeah. I'm not sure how large that figures, but they are actually credentialing people in other countries already, and we do not stop that, nor could we even if we wanted to.
Right.
So,
And I think you mentioned Western District has some people outside
yeah.
of the U.S. credential, and I know some individual congregations that have done this as well. It does have some challenges. Our credentialing process is reviewing credentials, ensuring we do background checks and things like that we would have a difficult time doing for people in other countries. I think another piece of this is that we do work closely with Mennonite World Conference, and we've had a number of discussions with them in regards to how do we relate to the national bodies of other countries. And so there are some limitations that we honor based on our relationship with Mennonite World Conference and our understanding of the relationship between the individual congregations in another country and their governing bodies, and we don't want to infringe upon those relationships, just like we wouldn't want someone to do that from another country and infringe on our relationships with one of our congregations. We'll go to John Carlson, and this question comes from Virginia, where I began my journey in Mennonite Church USA. How have the more traditional congregations' concerns regarding LGBT inclusion been addressed by Mennonite Church USA?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn, and thanks to whoever in Virginia raised this question. The MCUSA resolutions process is clear that unless otherwise specified, resolutions are not intended to be binding on area conferences or congregations. Resolutions pertain to how the executive board and program agencies and churchwide agencies go about their business. So the resolution for repentance and transformation is not binding on area conferences or congregations. Area conferences still retain the ability to establish expectations for membership of their congregations being members and for ministerial credentials. Most area conferences recognize that congregations also have the right to establish their own criteria for membership. So no congregation is forced by this resolution to become affirming or inclusive of LGBTQ plus individuals. There are 3 conferences in the MCUSA structure that still prohibit credentialed leaders from performing same-sex marriages, and they retain that right within our system.
All right. And maybe another part of this is this question. And this is a challenging question for me, John, especially as we come out of the convention where we've had the most racially diverse convention that we've had in a number of years. We have definitely increased leadership of people of color in a number of roles on our executive board, on our staff. I was initially hired to work with racial ethnic people in the denomination. I don't know if people know that, but I was the director of racial ethnic engagement. So we have a number of programs that really seek to hear and listen to leaders of color. So this is the question, though. What steps have been taken to address the concerns of people of color related to the 2022 Repentance and Transformation document?
Yeah, and I would say this is a hard question for me as well, as a white leader in this system. I did try to ask Glenn to speak for all people of color everywhere, and he told me he wasn't allowed to do that. But I don't know, maybe one day, Glenn, will we get you
Maybe
there?
one
I don't
day.
think so. I will say we have taken these concerns seriously. I personally have tried to reach out and meet with BIPOC leaders in Mosaic. Some have been open to meeting with me. Got to hop on the train, have a lovely lunch at Reading Terminal Market a couple years ago. Others have been less open to meeting and having direct conversation. One of the really challenging dynamics has been the ways that this echoes some of the experiences folks had when Lancaster Mennonite Conference withdrew from the denomination. A pattern that people recognized is that white leaders would often name the concerns of BIPOC leaders, but those BIPOC leaders would not be given an opportunity to name those concerns or would not take the opportunity to name those concerns directly. I can't say that that same dynamic is happening now, but there are echoes of it that have made this aspect of the conversation very fraught and difficult. At the same time, I think we do take seriously some of the concerns that we've heard. Concerns about being time and task oriented. That is a very fair critique of Mennonites, especially Mennonites of European heritage. Concerns about the complexity of language and translation. These are valid concerns as well. We're offering this webinar with translation into 2 languages. I wish that we could offer more, but even those 2 languages is an improvement from what we would have been able to do even just a few years ago. So we are trying to take these concerns seriously. And I also wish we had better forums to talk about these concerns directly with the people most affected.
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I think those things are challenging, and of course, again, I actually started before I was a part of the denomination with the Damascus Road team in Virginia Conference, and so I've been working at these issues of racial justice and inclusion of BIPOC people for probably about 25 years in Mennonite Church USA, and I have often been challenged by how this is my personal experience. People of color have been used as pawns in some of these arguments, and have not been allowed to either speak, or they have been giving intentionally false information in order to create a divide. This is my historic experience of 25 years of working at these issues and having private conversations with racial ethnic people. I've actually talked to a few BIPOC people over my lifetime about some of these issues and about their concerns in the church. So personally, and has it influenced my leadership as executive director? Of course it has. And I think that we've actually seen some changes in the denomination because of the excellent work of people like Iris Daly Alden Hartshorn, Sue Park Herr. We have our racial ethnic a leadership committee that really is a forum for leaders from around the church, and so there's some work to do. But I do think that we've actually really tried to hear and listen to people of color in this church.
Mhm.
Hey, I'm really invested in this on a number of levels, not as just my role as executive director, but as a Black person leading this church. I'm very sensitive to this, and and I really want to challenge Mennonite Church USA to really not use people of color as pawns. And I think that people of color do have the ability to express themselves and speak for themselves, and we do have to provide the forum. So putting on my other hat, but they do have that capacity.
Yeah, and I think just to illustrate some ways that this church is changing and growing, and I know that it has been painful and difficult. The work is incomplete. There's a long road ahead of us, but I'm serving on the executive board as a first generation Mennonite, a convicted Anabaptist. I did not grow up in this tradition. Our African American Mennonite Association appointee to the board she's a cradle Mennonite, right? And so she's been around this church longer than I have. She grew up in this church. And that's not something you could have said 20 or 30 years ago, probably. And so there are some really good things happening, even while there's still more work ahead of us.
All right, thank you. Okay, Marty, want to broaden this out a little bit. We had a question from Central District Conference. about church statements. Overall, how do church statement resolutions help or harm the mission of Mennonite Church USA?
Well, as someone who was on the resolutions committee this last biennium, I think that's a really good question. I think that resolutions can really further the work for our congregations. I think when you go back to this summer when we updated the statement on immigration, that was at the Summer Delegate Assembly. It's an example of a resolution statement that I think is very helpful. It seemed very timely with the world that we're living in right now. And this, I hope, it was meant to be a resource for congregations as they can reach out to immigrants and also asylum seekers in their communities. And right now, we really need that. I want to also just mention, we earlier talked about direct membership. The Resolutions Committee this past biennium heard from several sources that we were going to get a resolution about direct membership, that some of the conferences were working on it, but we never did get a resolution. And so that was the end of that, because that didn't happen. And as said before, resolutions are the way that we as a denomination make decisions. There's a resolutions committee, and then those resolutions come to the delegate body, and all of us who are delegates then have an opportunity to vote on those. As Glenn or somebody said, that all of us have the opportunity to submit a resolution. There's a process for that. And so I think it's a system that works really well. We've also kind of made some changes in the process so that resolutions are a little bit more streamlined and a little less chaotic than what I thought they were sometimes in the past, where lots of floor resolutions were introduced and then they kind of went all kinds of different directions. So I think the process we have right now is a really good one. And I also want to just say, we are all Mennonite Church USA, and all of us have a responsibility to fully participate in God's work in the world as Mennonites. Do we always get it right with our resolutions? No, we don't. But we make the best decision based on the information we have at the time. And so I feel very good about our process.
All right, thank you.
Is it possible? I know that I'm not on the list right now, but two things I think are really, really good and important examples of how the resolution process has been helpful. One would be just the establishment by the delegate body of the Corinthian Plan, which is a nationwide insurance plan for pastors and leaders in the church, has been extremely, extremely helpful. At the same time, if you go back to 2015, and we don't often like to go back there, but one of the things that was passed there was a statement on sexual abuse in the church. Because of that statement, we had the first ever healthy boundaries training requirements for pastors and credentialed leaders in the church that started in 2017, bear fruit to actually also reworking the sexual misconduct policies and procedures, and it directly resulted in the prevention and accountability resource now. That's a legacy of that resolution that was passed in 2015. And so when we fight about the resolutions, it seems like none of them work, but actually there are times where we can speak together with one voice and say, no, there's things that are important for us as a church for us to do together, and we can actually get those done. If we didn't have those kind of statements or resolutions at all, we would be, I think, in many cases, a much weaker church. So I just, from my seat, there are some things that we do that are really, really important together, and do it well, of course. But yeah, they really are important. So thanks for obliging me.
Yep. I think we have a few questions that are kind of around the same theme about this partnership proposal. There seems to be some questions on the timing of that, why it's not possible. Maybe we could clarify that. I mean, I don't know, Marty, if you want to start, or who wants to maybe, answer that specific question.
Well, I can give it a try. As I understand, the original news release and the original decision that came out of Mosaic was for a partnership. That was never very clearly defined. There was never like a proposal of what that would look like. Now, that's not, I'm not being critical to Mosaic there. There was never really any work to further that. The program entity idea was then explored. I think some of the problems that executive board had with program entity, Mennonite Health Services and Everence are program entities. They are not technically part of Mennonite Church USA. They are like more like MCC, which is relates to a bunch of different denominations. And like I had said, we appoint board members, but there's no direct accountability. So program entity, moving from an area conference to a program entity has not been done. Not to say it couldn't be done, but it certainly also would be probably a time-consuming process. I think that part of what executive board was hoping for was that we could work into this committee that's being formed right now to work on some new structures before we make lots of huge changes in particular areas. And so that's why it didn't feel like at that time that was a proposal that would work very well for us. I had somebody tell me that we made the wrong decision. It was a decision that we felt was the right decision.
Well, part of it, and yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, if I could just add to that a little bit. So the language gets somewhat complex here. Mosaic has used this language of partnership, which is something MCUSA has lots of partners all over the place. I don't know if you saw that we just joined with, is it 100 other faith groups, Glenn, and sort of cautioning about political violence and advocating for people to be able to share their voice in the public square without fear of retribution. I mean, I would say that we are partners with all of those folks, but we don't necessarily have a structured, organized relationship with them. As I understood it, Mosaic was using the language of partnership to speak of something structured, organized, maybe even recognized by the bylaws. Since that doesn't exist in our current bylaws, Mosaic asked if they could become a program entity. This is something that is recognized in our bylaws. As Marty said, Everence, MHS Alliance fall into this category. The complexity becomes that Mosaic would continue to operate as an area conference. They would have congregations as members. They would extend ministerial credentials. They would do all of the things that our area conferences do while having this other status. And it seemed like that had the potential to create significant destabilization in the system. Mosaic is one of 16 area conferences. The executive board has a responsibility to treat all area conferences equitably. And it also seems like it could create liability for the denomination because there is ambiguity about roles and responsibilities, especially around credentialing.
And Michael, maybe you'll speak to this. I know that we've had, as staff, had some conversations, especially we didn't have a fully developed plan, and I think we were really clear with the leaders of Mosaic. I had some conversations with Steve about it, and also, again, what happens to credentials and congregations? Those things have to be figured out when you're making massive changes in structure and polity. Those things don't just happen through a press release. And so I don't know, Michael, if you want to have any additional clarification for that. I had a number of conversations before any press release was ever made. So I know some people that have sent us emails have a certain timing because they've read that in the press. But again, I've had relationships with people for a number of years and had conversations about structure and potentials and all those things. Never formal, but I've had those conversations.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find a little bit of a question in that, but sorry, no offense.
No problem.
Never say that to your boss on a webinar.
No, it's fine.
Right?
It's fine.
I will say, like, so we actually do have, there's an example of like a partnership we have that's a structured partnership. MCUSA is a founding partner of the Caneo Center, which is a ministry of restoration for pastors in Puerto Rico. We were a founding partner. We've been formal partners with them for 3 years. We contribute some money to them to make sure their ministry is stable, and also it provides some benefits to our members that want to go and take advantage of that. That's a good example to me of what a partnership is. What they don't do is they don't credential leaders, and their people that go there don't get to be delegates in MCUSA. So that's why I'm with John. There's a little bit of a misnomer. Like, of course, we can partner with people around ministry things, but when your description of partnership is basically an area conference, because remember, we understand our way of relating with all conferences and congregations as partnership, that gives then also the benefits of representation in the delegate body for both congregations and conferences. If that's what you're wanting to do, I think for me, what was difficult to understand, and again, I was not in the board to board conversations, but it's difficult to understand is what's different about this than what there already is. And if it's no different in function, it's just different in name, then what's the benefit of actually doing it? It would cause more problems than it solves. So, yeah, I don't know if that was helpful, Glenn, but
Yeah, yeah. Uh, any other?
Yeah, I'm just seeing there's a question about credentialing and the interplay between the denomination's responsibility for credentialing and the area conferences, and how that could get complex in if Mosaic were to change its status. Do you want to speak to that, Michael?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Mosaic could still credential whether they are members of Mennonite Church USA or not. You just wouldn't be credentialing on behalf of Mennonite Church USA. So Mosaic,
Right.
as its own entity, can credential. The congregations just wouldn't be members of Mennonite
yeah,
Church USA.
that's right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
But
yeah,
if Mosaic were to be a program entity that was extending credentials, it would create complexity. Does MCUSA have responsibility over those credentials or not? As we've seen in the case of the Southern Baptist Convention, even though they have a very decentralized structure, there still is a case to be made that the national body is responsible, particularly for the misconduct of individual ministers.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I
Thank
think
you.
there's another issue with that as far as the those credentials. Like, well, yeah, I don't know, Michael. You can speak. I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, yeah. Frankly, I don't. I'm not tracking actually with this question, so I'm sorry.
I think that
We
I think the question is asking if the area conference is responsible for credentialing, then why would it be a problem for Mosaic to not be an area conference but still credential? Yeah, okay, I can see why you're getting confused because I'm
yeah.
also getting a little confused.
Then they could credential, but we wouldn't have any responsibilities for those
Yeah.
credentials, and they wouldn't be credentials of Mennonite
In our
Church USA.
bylaws, like
Yeah.
so conferences credential on behalf of MCUSA, and that's part of
Right.
their responsibility in their function as an area conference. And if you go through all of the bylaws, it has the duties, the rights, and responsibilities of what you actually sign on for when you become an area conference, and that includes credentialing, keeping records and metadata. There's all kinds of provisions that are with the conference. I guess my question is, if Mosaic was a partner entity that did all of the things that a conference did, it's just a question for Mosaic leaders that I've never asked. What is the benefit of simply that change in designation in the name if the function is exactly the same? That's what I wouldn't understand. So just calling a conference a program, let's just call all the conferences program agencies with the same. You know what I mean? I don't quite understand. Yeah, what it is. So we do have potential for program agencies, but they function and program partners function in a particular way. And I would even say probably in Mosaic and other places with other ministries and program relationships that they don't allow those folks to credential and to do other things within their midst. So, if they became independent of MCUSA, of course they could credential all they want.
Mhm.
That's no longer an issue with us. So I don't know.
Yeah, and we're still open to again, like working at specific ministries with Mosaic. I think that I've read some of the questions, and I guess how they come across. Well, one question is from in the chat. It says, what would resolve this for Mennonite Church USA? And I think I have a challenge answering that question because I value Mosaic. I value their ability to make their own decisions as a conference. Uh, I don't, yeah, I'm not sure what we need to resolve from the denominational standpoint when a conference decides to exercise its authority. So I mean, Marty, I don't know if you want to maybe speak to that. I mean, as a board member, what resolution are you seeking?
I'm sorry, I'm with Michael here. I'm getting kind of lost in the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a question that says, what would resolve this for
Oh,
Mennonite Church USA? And I'm assuming they mean for the executive board and staff. Um, because again, Mennonite Church USA is all of our collective conferences and congregations. But
well, also just to note, there was a question about, I don't know if I exactly read it right, but I got the impression that the person was asking whether we got a formal partnership proposal from Mosaic, which we did not. I mean, there wasn't like a written proposal of, this is what we want approved. It was an idea and a concept, as I would describe it. I think the other comment that I wanted to make was that while we're talking about all this stuff and this, we talked about the Southern Baptists and all these legalese, I'm one of those people that often thinks about liability, and I think about the legal part of things, and I think about the fact that we are also a nonprofit, and so some of the ramifications of some of those kinds of things that we all also have to take into consideration whenever we're thinking about some of these things. I didn't answer your question, Glenn.
Was the question what would resolve this for MCUSA? I mean, MCUSA desires to see God's healing and hope flow through us to the world. We desire to be a community of reconciliation. And so I think seeing improved relationships, I think that's the goal that we would see as what we aspire to be people who put our peace witness into practice in our internal disagreements as much as we bring them in service to the rest of the wider world. How that works out in practice, I honestly feel like I don't know at this point in the process. There were a few questions that came through asking about kind of the nuts and bolts of how did we get to the point of the executive board saying we didn't see Mosaic's proposal as viable. As I look back on that process, I would say I wish that the communication had gone better. And that's why I was really hopeful that we could move into a mediated conversation, because I'm not convinced that we were always hearing each other well. And so I really would wish for a space where everyone involved, not everyone involved in the decision making, because ultimately MCUSA authority is carried by delegates, as is Mosaic's authority, but where leadership at least can be in the room together with some outside assistance and really listen well to one another. That's what I would hope and wish for.
Yeah. And part of this is part of our structure, right? The challenges that we have with the way we are organized. You have staff who've served in these roles for a number of years and have had conversations. And then you have boards, right? Boards that kind of come and go. Board leadership changes. Sometimes things get lost in the shuffle. People don't have the history, just like some of the questions that are coming now. People don't have the history. They haven't spent the hours and hours that we've spent, and hours on planes and hotel rooms trying to work at these relationships really with, and I would say with integrity. I do believe that the leaders of Mosaic are really trying to work at what's in the best interest of Mosaic and its members. And I can't do anything but support that. I've read the new document that came out, the centering document. I thought it was very close to the ideals and values of what we hold together as Mennonite Church USA. Very similar language, So these disagreements, I do think at times are unnecessary. I think when people are following the call of God, that we should celebrate that, even though it may be painful. So, yeah. So, we continue to trust God in these processes. God is bigger than all of us, right? Bigger than this denomination, bigger than any conference, bigger than any one individual. So I just pray that, like John, that there's a lot of work to do, and I pray that we're able to do those things effectively to shine a positive light on our Christian witness. Let's see. We still have a few questions. I'll have another question from Indiana, Michigan, this for the first time tonight. how best can people financially support the work of Mennonite Church USA? So my response to that is your individual donations matter. We need your financial support. Um, to do this work, you can donate on our online giving site, and you can give to the ministries that uh, mean the most to you. And we also encourage you to give at each level of the denomination. Give to your local conference, give to your local congregation. Uh, I believe in the spirit of generosity. I give at all of those levels, and so that's how we support this work. And uh, give your dollars to the programs that you think are most vital uh, to the work of this denomination. Let's see what other questions we have. Again, I think there was some earlier questions about the format of the proposal and why maybe Mosaic board was surprised. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't part of the board to board discussions. Uh, Marty or John, any other additional insight you want to share about that? No, let me see if we have
Yeah,
some.
I mean, I
Okay, go
would
ahead,
just
John.
say, so there were some draft documents that were exchanged. Yeah, so the executive board was responding to some things that Mosaic did put in writing. We never quite got to the level of addressing some of the really central kind of sticking points. Congregational membership. Congregations, no program entity currently has congregations as members, so derived membership kind of breaks down at that level, which impacts delegate representation and the ability to have members serve on agency boards, and then credentialing. So those areas remained just really fuzzy throughout the process.
Mhm. And some of the questions, and this is a question again that I've gotten heard for a number of times with other conferences that have left, is about the healing process. I think we touched on it briefly, but yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what you all would have to say about the healing process if Mennonite Church USA stays. I think one of my questions would be, where does the healing need to happen? Is it with the person that asked the question? Is it board to board? Is it staff to staff? What are your thoughts on that?
I guess one question I would have is what would be helpful from the Mosaic end of things?
Yeah,
What would they find helpful?
that's good. Michael, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with Marty. I think it would be helpful to know like what would be helpful to Mosaic leaders. I mean, I would be most attentive to church vitality and the folks from my team that work with Mosaic staff. And yeah, I would certainly be willing to sit down, especially starting with myself and Steve, to say, okay, what needs to happen in order for us to get to a place where yeah, that we can work cooperatively together. I think that's eminently doable. Like if that happens, and I do expect, even if Mosaic votes to leave, that we'll continue to have conversations with Mosaic in significant ways around particular ministries that are important to both of us, and then most of those being Hispanic ministries. Yeah, so yeah, so yeah, just starting with conversation, moving towards one another, trying to figure out what specifically are some of the issues we need to work at, and then go from there. So yeah, that's a little more limited because that's a little bit smaller
Yep.
subset of people. Like we're not talking about a small group of folks. That's a little bit different than denominations, conferences, how congregations, and what congregations are experiencing or feeling that have witnessed this. The broader churches, they've witnessed, what seems through the press releases like a fairly
Yeah.
big fight between their leaders in a conference, and how do we work at that? Probably some conversation within conference ministry circles with conference ministers, and maybe CLC might be a place to work at that as well.
Yeah. All right. Two more questions and we will end. Another question from CDC: What percentage of Mennonite Church USA's budget was contributed by Mosaic Conference churches, individuals, to what effect? So I can give you the information on just overall budget. The budget for Mennonite Church USA is 1.4 million. Used to be more than that. It's a lot less now. So 1.4 million. Mosaic congregations give about the total from now. So area conferences uh, give us a smaller portion of the budget. Most of the budget for Mennonite Church USA is funded by Everence and Mennonite Mission Network. Mennonite Mission Network and Everence combined provide 40% of our budget via first fruits. Individuals total give about 12% of the budget for Mennonite Church USA. The top 6 giving area conferences each give between 10 and 15% of the total of conference giving. So not of the total, not of that big number, but of conference giving. And so Mosaic gives around 4% of the total that we get from all of the area conferences. But the top 6 conferences give over half of the budget amount, and they each give, well, yeah, more than that. I'm sorry, about 70% of the budget, and that's 10 to 15%. So very few area conferences support us through first fruits. Each conference is different. Everence and Mennonite Mission Network are actually our big budget drivers, and then individual congregations, 12%. Final question for everyone that everyone can answer. What message would you like Mosaic members to hear before they vote in November? Maybe we'll start with you, Marty.
Well, first, I want to acknowledge that Mosaic has been through a lot of change. They went from primarily being a regional area conference, and then, I don't know, 5 years ago-ish, somewhere in that range, they had churches from Florida all the way to California. And so it changed, I think. My sense is it changed the dynamics within the conference when you're moving from a regional to more national. And I think that has changed a lot of things for them. And so I trust that Mosaic is doing good work, and I trust that they are following the Spirit and where they should be going. And so I respect their process. I wish there would be ways that we could work together on some of this, but so far we have not obviously found a way to do that. But I have high regard for Mosaic and the work that they're doing as a mission organization.
John?
Yeah, I believe that we are all better together. I think that God has called us to be a body. God has called us to seek to live at peace with one another. It is a really challenging thing to do. One of the last questions we got here is asking, if we're in this impasse, what are the gestures or initiatives that can help us get unstuck? And if folks have suggestions, ideas, I mean, send me an email. I have attended in person every Mosaic Delegate Assembly that they've had since their formation. Our national staff have been there. I believe Marty's going to be there coming up in November here. I'm planning to be there just because I have so much time invested in this. I care deeply about Mosaic, its member congregations, its pastors, the people in those congregations, its ministries, the witness that they have around intercultural growth and transformation. Like Glenn said, I read the new centering document that Mosaic has drafted, and it sounds like who MCUSA is. And so I think my appeal is that we live out our values by being reconciled one to another.
Michael Danner?
And I mean, not to repeat what Marty and John said, but yeah, I also agree as well. I still remember being at the assembly when they were working through the merger of Eastern District and Franconia to actually shape Mosaic with kind of a new vision. And it was really actually beautiful. It's beautiful to see what they are. If you haven't been to the assembly, I mean, they really are they are a different kind of conference in some ways, in terms of a multiracial congregation, quite a lot of diversity, quite a lot of joy and missional energy and partnership. Enjoy the staff and so yeah, it's a sadness to think that they're not going to maybe not be part of Mennonite Church USA anymore. The only hope or prayer is for the conference leaders and for the congregational leaders and the folks in the church to realize that, like, what's really mostly important right now, and I think especially as we think about the larger context of where we're at in the United States, what's most important is they stay central to their vision, their identity, and their mission, which is rooted in who Jesus is. And yes, there's grief involved whenever human communities can't work it out and maybe can't do reconciliation. But at the same time, at this point, this probably shouldn't be taking all of the energy or even a majority of energy in our organizations, because there's a lot of challenges that we have as followers of Jesus, as Anabaptist Mennonites in the United States. And so, I would also just say we're just praying for you and hope that you continue to lead out of your vision and mission and who God is, and pray that we can do that together, and you can do that as a part of MCUSA in relationship with 14 other conferences. If not, we bless you in what comes next, and we'll continue to work at that together, what that means. So yeah.
All right. I just want to say that we are grateful to have the people of Mosaic as members of Mennonite Church USA. Many of you I've had relationships over 20 plus years, from the congregations that were formerly part of Southeast Conference, the congregations out in California. I've worked side by side with a number of people in Mosaic, the people in Florida. So you are vital, important people in the life of this church. And I would just say, hey, we have to follow your conscience, and you follow God's call. I mean, that's what we're all here to do as leaders and ministers of the gospel, is to follow God's call. And this denomination is here to serve you. We will continue to serve you faithfully as members of this denomination. I encourage all of us to support the work of the local church, which is really the heart and soul of what we do in ministry. It's the place where all of the things that we talk about, where we actually meet people and are able to meet people's needs. So I would encourage you as members of Mosaic to make that your primary focus, to touch and heal and help transform people for the gospel of Jesus Christ. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Bless you all as you continue your evening, and make sure for the latest news and events from Mennonite Church USA, be sure to subscribe to Peace Mail, our biweekly e-newsletter, and Menoticias, the monthly Spanish language newsletter of Hispanic Ministries and Mennonite Church USA. Thank you all. You all have a blessed night.